I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, I want to show you a variety of different ways you can generate an octave effect with your Fractal FM3, FM9, AxeFX3 or VP4. To get started, I have a Tyler JTG plugged into the AxeFX3. I've got a pair of the Brit 800 2203 high amp models dialed up for a stereo dual amp setup here, and I'm using a pair of my free cab IRs here. You can grab those in the video description. A touch of the studio reverb. I'm just going to use this as a straightforward crunch sound. A great way to start with a crunchy Marshall style tone. Let's begin with what I would probably consider the most immediate way to get an octave effect. It is using the pitch block Octave Divider mode in here. All I've done is I have turned the level on the 2 octaves down setting over here all the way to 0, but the 1 octave down is set at 100% on here. It can be a great way to get a slightly fatter octave sound by blending in an octave down and 2 octaves down. But let's just have a listen to what this does when I kick it in. I really like the character in the Octave Divider. I also like the fact that the way it is generating those octaves is very reminiscent of old octave pedals, where it's actually generating a synth tone in there. And we're going to come back and revisit that synth idea in just a little bit. I would say in general, with all of these octave effects, when you're running them in front of an amp, a little bit of high cut goes a long way over here. So setting the high cut somewhere around 4,000 or 3,000 hertz can really just help fatten things up in there. Let's have a listen to that. That's a really fat, character-filled octave sound. I love that. And you running that with something like a filter afterwards. I'm using the envelope filter type at the stock settings to get you some massively funky sound. Of course, you can play around with the overall mix control on there to blend as much of those octaves in as you want. It can also be handy to add a little bit of a level boost on there as well, just to add some more color. So this Octave Divider is going to give you what I would consider a slightly old school pedal style octave sound in there. It's got a lot of character. It definitely tracks a lot better than some old octave pedals on there. But if you want absolute best in class pitch shifting, you want to use the dual chromatic type over here. There are 2 voices available. What I have done is I've turned the level on voice 2 all the way down for now, and I've just set the shift on voice 1 to -12, level all the way up, panned down the center. I haven't touched any of the extra parameters except for the high cut in here. I'm running at 4K. This one gives us a much tighter style octave in there. We can, of course, adjust that by playing with the delay and with the tracking. But for now, if you just want a really tight octave, try the dual chromatic. wanted to emulate what the Octave Divider is doing, I could use the second voice to go 24 semitones down. I could add a high octave on there. I could add any interval that I like. In fact, if I used, instead of the dual chromatic type, I use the dual diatonic type, I could have that locked into a particular scale and get an octave down with third or fifth harmonies that stay within a particular key center. However, I'm running these amps in stereo here at the moment, and a really fun trick is to use both voices for 12 semitones down, so an octave. We'll turn the levels up on both, but we'll pan them hard left and hard right. We'll add a tiny amount of detune to each voice. So I've gone 5 cents on either side over there. We can add a little bit of delay if we want to, even a bit of feedback if we wanted to make it sound funky. But this is now going to add a whole bunch of stereo width to our tone here. Have a listen to this. Even more fun with this by using the quad chromatic mode. I've added a sub octave in here, so 24 semitones down and an octave above. I'll just bring the level on both of these down a little bit. So I've still got that super wide, thick octave down, but I've got a lower octave and a higher octave on there too. Cool thing about this mode is you can go to the master section and you can set the pitch tracking to chords on here. Furthermore, if you wanted to run this after distortion, you could play around with the detector source, which we will do in just a second, but let's have a listen to chords on this now. This is kind of giving me like Electro Harmonix POG vibe. Try the same trick we used before where we're using the dual chromatic and we've got 2 octave down voices with a slight amount of detune here. But what we're going to do is we're going to run it after the amp and before the cab. Now, again, I've got the high cut at 4K, but what I've done in the master and mod section is I've set the detector source to input 1. This way, the pitch block is using the raw DI signal from my guitar, so with no distortion applied to it to detect the pitch and provide the octave effect, but I'm able to place the pitch effect after any distortion. Let's have a listen to the difference between block in and then input 1 as the source. And again, if you wanted to, you could set the pitch tracking to chords over here and it will sound great. Next up is my personal favorite way to generate an octave style effect, and it is using the ring modulator block. One very cool thing about the Fractal ring modulator is you can set it up to detect the pitch as the ring modulator carrier frequency. To do that, you just turn pitch tracking on, then you set the frequency multiplier to 0.5. I really like, again, having a high cut around 4 kilohertz on here. This is just a massively thick sounding octave. And that combined with an envelope filter is so gloriously funky. I love with the ring modulator, when you play 2 notes at a time, it freaks out and it gives you, again, a sound full of character. Character is definitely the word of the day when we're using these effects. I feel like if you're going to use pitch shifting effects, you should really lean into the boundary cases where they start to freak out a little bit or do imperfect things, because that's kind of where the magic happens, and that ring modulator does that so well. Another approach would be using a synth in here. So we talked about the octave divider earlier, essentially generating some subtone synth settings. What I'm doing here is I'm using a triangle wave with the shift set to -12. I've set the filter frequency at 800 hertz, so that's a lot of filtering on there. Mix at 50%. I've turned the level up a little bit on here. You could also add a sub-octave using voice 2 over here, but at the moment, I've turned that all the way down. You can play around with the different wave types. I tend to like triangle on this, but I'll let you hear a couple of them, then we'll blend in that low octave. Thing about that synth approach is you've got so many filtering options in there and the ability to combine different waveforms along with up to 3 voices on there. That can be a really great one if you want to get a little bit of that kind of glitchy character out of your octave style effects or any interval in general. I did just really want to focus on the octave down effect today because it is such a widely used effect for guitar and especially bass guitar on there. So I would be saying if you wanted really tight harmonies and really precise pitch shifting, use the dual chromatic or quad chromatic modes in the pitch shifter. If you want more of an old school like pedal style effect, use the octave divider or the synth. And if you just want something that has a character all its own, try the ring modulator with the pitch tracking on and the overall frequency multiplier at 0.5. I love this in combination with a filter and with a fuzz and some delay. So this is the Leon's Live preset from the latest Factory Banks in here. There is a scene in here, I think it's scene 7, called Gunk, which uses the ring mod, the envelope filter, and the FAS Stealth Blue amp. I'm going to add some multi-tap delay to all of this, and I will kick on the fuzz face as well so we can make it gloriously filthy. This one is available in the Factory Banks, like I said. If you've got any other questions or requests, let me know in the comment section below. I'm going to play you out with some more filthy octave down riffs. Let's do it.